Welcome to the Only Male Cruise Show, the podcast. I am the only male cruise. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Let's go to work. With the title of today's show, CardiB versus TashaK, opening statements. And let me just say, before the attorneys actually had the opportunity to do their opening statements, a whole day had gone on, and they were pretty much setting the ground rules as far as what was going to be admissible and okay to enter is really detailed. And so the morning of the opening statements, Tasha's attorney came in and pretty much was trying to re-argue things that the judge had already made decisions on. And it kind of set CardiB's attorney off just a little bit. This Cardi's attorney is solid, very professional. But, so they had their little, scrimmage, like Cardi's attorney was like, well, I want to see what had happened. And I, if you can tell from opening statements who's going to win the case, then it's very clear who was going to win this case. Cardi's attorney, super duper solid. So she made a really good decision there. Selecting her. So anyway, they had to argue. They had their little conversation about, what was going to be allowed, and the judge said, okay. We finally came to that conclusion, and the judge was like, okay, well, all right, it's time. We're going to go ahead and rock these opening statements. We've got the decisions made, and this is how it's going down. So well, you know what? Let's just get into it. So the judge says, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to have opening statements. The plaintiff in this case has the burden of proof, and so they have an opportunity to make their opening statement first. For the plaintiff, and just to make sure that counsel knows, you both have 30 minutes. The plaintiff's time will be on the clock to the left behind the jury, and the defendant's time will be on the right. I will not give you a warning when your time is about to expire, but when it's up, I'll tell you you need to wrap up. Okay? Thank you. Mrs. Matz. This is Cardi's attorney. Good afternoon, members of the jury. My name is Sarah Matz. I represent the plaintiff, Belcalis Almanzar, who is professionally known as CardiB. Many of you have likely heard of her before. She's a very talented rap artist. And you've heard some things in this case yesterday. But today, as the judge said, you're going to start to hear the actual evidence. The judge is going to instruct you on the law. And based upon what you heard yesterday, you might think you know a little bit about this case. But today, you're actually going to start hearing about it. You're here to decide 3 basic claims. Our client has brought claims for defamation, invasion of privacy, and putting someone in a false light and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But make no mistake, the evidence is going to show you that you're actually here because of the defendants and their behavior. This is not a case where the defendants merely said things that weren't true, that weren't harmful, or criticized my client or her music. That's not what this case is about. The evidence is going to show you that this case is about the defendants making repeated and relentless statements that are both vile and false about my client to torture her out of greed and spite. I apologize in advance. You are going to hear some curse words today and probably many days in this trial. I will assure you, these are not necessarily my words, but these are the words I'm going to describe in some of the evidence you're going to hear today. So I'm going to use some of the words that you will hear later in evidence. The evidence is going to show that the defendants Ms. Kibi and her company, Kibi Studios, which is under her control, published despicable falsehoods about my client in videos and written posts that were put on social media for the world to see. The evidence is going to show that they contain statements that my client engaged in disgusting and debasing acts with a beer bottle. The evidence is going to show you that one of the statements that was made is that my client allegedly, while naked on a stage, took a beer bottle from a patron, put it in her vagina, took it out, drank a sip out of it, and handed it back to the patron. The evidence is also going to show that the defendants took to social media and published videos and posts saying that my client has herpes and HPV. The evidence is also going to show the defendants published videos on the internet that contain statements that my client committed adultery, cheated on her husband, that she engaged in prostitution, and used cocaine. The evidence is also going to show you that none of this is true and that the defendants knew these statements were false or had a reckless disregard for whether or not they were true prior to publishing them repeatedly. This is not an isolated incident. The evidence is going to show that for years the defendants have continued to make these statements and republish them and have taken pleasure in doing that to my client. Some of the evidence you're going to see is that defendants would, in their tweets and Instagrams, would call my client #herpesB as a play on her professional name, CardiB, or they would tag her by actually using her handles on those social media applications to ensure both that they could use that as clickbait to drive viewers and ad revenue to their platform, and to ensure that everyone knew, including my client, that those were directed at her so that she would see the lies they were spreading about her. You're also going to hear evidence that all of the defendant's statements are provably false. You're going to see medical records that show that my client does not have herpes and does not have HPV, and you're going to hear that in testimony as well. You're going to hear that the defendant did not have any reliable information or proof that my client had those sexually transmitted infections before she went online and said it or published videos saying it. You're also going to hear the defendant admit that her source of the statement that my client had herpes was completely unreliable, that Ms. Kibi herself actually thought that the person was lying, that that source had told Ms. Kibi that she had a criminal past, and that Ms. Kibi believed that source had mental issues prior to publishing the statements. But Ms. Kibi published them anyway. You're also going to hear Ms. Kibi admit that she didn't obtain any corroborating documentation from this alleged source, and also that prior to the time that she published the statements about my client having herpes, that she knew there were documents out there that another person she knew who helped her to get this interview would debunk her source. She knew that before she published the statements, and the evidence will show you that she published them anyway. With reference to Ms. Kibi's statements that my client has HPV, you're going to hear evidence that shows that when she told the world and millions of people that my client has HPV, that she thought the story was false, but she put it out anyway. You're also going to hear that my client has never engaged in a debasing act with a beer bottle or a sexual act with a beer bottle the way Ms. Kibi described, or in any manner. You're going to hear evidence that my client has not only never done that, but that the source that Ms. Kibi is going to try to rely on, a video online, doesn't resemble my client at all, and that no reasonable person could have looked at that video and thought it was my client without a complete and utter reckless disregard for the truth. You're also going to hear that despite the fact that Ms. Kibi follows my client on social media, and the fact that she's aware that my client often goes on social media to talk about allegations being made about her, that she didn't bother to look at my client's social media, even though she knew that my client might have made some statements saying that that wasn't her in the beer bottle video, which actually my client had made statements publicly, both on Twitter, and that was picked up in many news articles, showing that it was not her in the video. But again, the evidence is going to show you that Miss Kibi stuck her head in the sand and decided to proceed anyway. The fact that there was no reasonable basis for her to do so. You're also going to hear evidence that my client never engaged in adultery. She's never engaged in prostitution, and she's never done cocaine. Despite all of this, and you're going to hear evidence about the various time frames defendants had knowledge and the fact that at each step they had more and more knowledge. They have continued to make these statements many times, even while this lawsuit was pending, after it was filed. The evidence is going to show you that defendants are never going to stop unless you stop them. You're going to see evidence that my client sent not one, not two, but 3 separate cease and desist and demands for retraction prior to filing a lawsuit. That didn't stop the defendants. You're going to see that after defendants received the first one, Ms. Kibi went online and told the world she was going to wipe her ass with it. You're going to hear evidence that even after this lawsuit, Ms. Kibi still refused to take the statements down. You're also going to hear evidence that directly prior to this lawsuit being filed, Ms. Kibi sent another demand for retraction. As you were, Ms. Kibi was sent another demand for retraction that went unheeded. And again, she went online and told viewers that she would wipe her ass with it. The evidence is going to show that even after this lawsuit was filed, even after my client took the step of starting this lawsuit to stop the campaign of defamation, that the defendants continued to publish videos reiterating many of these statements. You're also going to hear evidence that during this lawsuit, another demand for retraction was sent regarding some of the new videos, and that defendant didn't even bother to read it. Instead, she told her attorneys to tell us to fuck off. Members of the jury, the evidence will show that we're here today because the defendants have just kept going. They've refused to stop. And they've said that they are never going to stop or take the videos down unless a court makes them. And that's why we're here today. The defendants have no incentive to take them down. They're making money using my client as clickbait. And these defamatory statements are salacious ways to draw consumers in. And Ms. Kibi, you're going to hear her that she freely admitted that she knows this upsets my client and does it intentionally. Now, the defense is going to try to convince you that the Unwind with TashaK platform is opinion. You heard that word a lot yesterday. Or that the defendants have some belief that the statements that they were making were true, or even more disgustingly, that this is some kind of humor. But you're all smart people, and the evidence that we're going to put before you is going to clearly show that none of that is the case. The defamatory statements are not opinion. The evidence is going to show that these are statements of fact that are not capable of being proven true or false. And as I said a moment ago, you're going to hear evidence that they are demonstrably false. You're going to hear evidence also that is exactly how Miss Kibi presented them to the viewers of her platform. She presented them as facts. She told people everything I said was accurate. She also referred to herself as a journalist to her viewers and has submitted that she has, although admits that she does not actually consider herself to be a journalist. At that time, Tasha's attorney, Mr. Sabak, he says, "Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is argument." And the judge says, "I'm sorry, it's what?" Sabak, "Argument." The judge, "Objection is overruled. You may proceed." Miss Matt says, "Thank you, Your Honor." You're going to hear that by doing that, she's misleading her own viewers. The evidence is also going to show that based upon the circumstances surrounding all of these, and even some of the defendant's own statements in later videos, that the defendants knew that some of these statements were false at the time they published them. And as to the others, that they clearly engaged in a reckless disregard for the truth because they knew that the sources of the alleged information weren't credible and that they had doubts about the veracity of those statements. The evidence is also going to show that this isn't funny. Saying people have highly stigmatic diseases and have engaged in disgusting and vile sexual acts with objects is not a joke. You're even going to hear Miss Keeby admit that she knows that statements like this, if false, are defamatory, and if someone said them about her, she would sue them. The evidence is going to show at the end of this that Miss Keeby's conduct and her company is so extreme, it goes beyond all possible bounds of decency, and it's atrocious and shouldn't be tolerated in a civil society. You're also going to see evidence that the defendants have intentionally done what they can to hurt and injure my client, and that unfortunately, that succeeded. It kind of has hurt my client. You're going to hear evidence that who my client is. She's both a worldwide famous performer, she's also a young mother. And at the end of the day, this conduct has hurt her, and she has suffered a tremendous amount of emotional pain from the statements and the impact that they've had on her. Now, most of you might have come in here thinking that my client isn't exactly like every single person in this room, and maybe she's not. She is an incredibly talented rap artist, an incredibly talented performer, and she's a woman, and she's a mother. She's many things. But at the end of the day, she's also a human being. You're going to see evidence that she's come from humble beginnings, and although she's achieved a high level of success, this shouldn't be the price. Is it okay for defendants to go on the internet in front of millions of people and say that my client has herpes and HPV? Is it okay for the defendants to say that my client engaged in sexual acts with a beer bottle? Is it okay for the defendants to say that my client engaged in adultery or prostitution or cocaine when the evidence is going to show you that those things aren't true? Of course not. Becoming successful and famous doesn't give anyone the right to spread malicious falsehoods. Members of the jury, the judge is going to instruct you on the law, and after you've seen the facts here, we respectfully submit that there's only going to be one conclusion, and that is that the defendants are liable for the conduct that they've alleged. We greatly appreciate your time and your patience during this process. Thank you. So the judge comes in and says, all right, for the defendants. So Mr. Sabak, which is Keeby's attorney, he jumps in. Mr. Sabak, Miss Keeby's favorite childhood memory was the time she spent with her mother, her uncles, brothers, at home watching celebrity news and making fun of the people they saw. This led to her interest in radio broadcast, which she began part-time while she was working at the Cheesecake Factory. She worked for many people. Many people know Clark Howard, who was a close mentor of hers. And as she tried to break into radio and found it very difficult, YouTube was a new avenue, a new platform, a new opportunity for creative people who want to get themselves out there and do it themselves. Now, Mr. Keeby has had his own interest. That was video production, video editing, and this is something he's always done. Music videos, films, commercials, advertisements. And it just so happens that while Miss Keeby is trying to bring herself up as a radio personality, Mr. Keeby is trying to bring himself up in video editing. And they met in 2004 at the Cheesecake Factory in Maryland. Mr. Keeby asked Miss Keeby out on a date 2 weeks after she started. They got married in 2006. 2010, moved to Atlanta. In 2015, while Mr. Keeby was at work, Miss Keeby was at home enjoying a glass of wine. And she saw a news article, a clip, some gossip news that Lil Wayne, who's a rapper, and his girlfriend breaking up. And it was probably the wine, but Miss Kibi decided to make a video about it, just as her general thoughts. Well, she made the video, posted on Facebook, went to sleep. A few hours later, her husband runs in the house. "What did you do, Tasha? My family can see all those videos or this video. Why did you post this? What are you talking about?" Says it has 5 million views. It went viral instantly. And at that moment, Miss Kibi and Mr. Kibi found their path in life. And that's when Unwind with TashaK, the YouTube channel, that's at issue today, began. Now, as I said, this project started in about 2015. And with all good things, they take time to build. And if you want to build something with a solid foundation, that's one brick at a time. So Miss Kibi and Mr. Kibi have been building their dream one brick at a time. Now, in 2018, that was a particularly good year for Unwind with TashaK. She has broken many stories, particularly stories about R. Kelly, just before the story that we're here to listen to today. And so, Miss Kibi, at the point, had already garnered much media attention. Her subscriber list had grown, and the momentum was going forward. And about beginning to middle of September 2018, what you're going to hear is that an individual named Star Marie Jones posted a video or was on a live chat with her followers, and the topic of plaintiff Miss Almanzar came up. And during that video, she made some allegations, but she alleged, and you'll hear that plaintiff and Star Marie, they lived together. They worked at the same strip club in New York, okay? And from that knowledge, her living with Ms. Almanzar, them working together, she made a few statements about Ms. Almanzar. And those statements, Ms. Kibi saw, those statements went viral. Those statements include things about, like I said, living with the plaintiff, her brushing time with prostitution, her drug use, and certain other things. And you will hear that video. That video went viral. You'll hear that it was not Ms. Jones' intent for that video to go viral or to publish a video about the plaintiff. It happened to come up during an unrelated live event. Regardless, it goes viral. And as all good journalists or reporters do, they want to get the scoop. So they went to get the story. And the reason why we're here today is because Miss Kibi got that story. And so Miss Kibi, a few days later, after this IG Live was released, arranged a story or an interview with Miss Jones, which you'll get to see. It's about 45 minutes to an hour, where it's detailed Miss Jones' relationship with the plaintiff, their time together in New York. You'll see how it describes the statements that are at issue here today. You will hear Miss Jones' version of it, and you'll hear Miss Kibi's cross-examining her as though she was an attorney to get the truth. You'll also hear how plaintiff contacted Miss Kibi, and you'll hear how Miss Kibi offered her an opportunity to discuss the video. Plaintiff declined. Plaintiff suggested that Miss Kibi should talk to her other friends that worked at the same strip club in New York, which she did. And you will hear that those friends confirmed those suspicions. But most importantly, aside from Star Marie Jones, the reason why it sparked this whole lawsuit, these allegations that the plaintiff claims are defamation, you will hear direct evidence showing that they are, in fact, true. And the majority of that evidence comes from the plaintiff's own mouth, her issue of prostitution, drug use. As far as this allegation of genital herpes, none was made. It was an allegation about code sores said in passing during that interview. But if plaintiff left it alone at that interview, which wasn't a big, huge follow-up interview, but by plaintiff commenting, making statements to the media, she now raises the profile of that video. And so now it becomes more popular. And every time plaintiff comments on Miss Kibi's videos or statements, that video garners more and more views. Everyone is familiar with humor. Everyone is familiar with opinion. Everyone needs context in order to appreciate that. And so, what you will get throughout this trial, ladies and gentlemen, is context. And so, I beg you to, as the judge said, wait for the evidence to be presented and take all of these allegations in the context. And context is not just in statement before, as we know, it's the statements prior and just after. Okay. And so I ask you not to make any judgment about what the plaintiff is alleging Ms. Kebe said until you actually hear the videos in the context, because context is everything, especially in the media business. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear about the true reason why you're here today. You will hear what it really is the plaintiff is asking you to do to Ms. Kebe, Mr. Kebe, and their company. You will see a video from the plaintiff discussing this issue, alleging things also untrue, but not at issue today, that Ms. Kebe is harassing her friends and the like. Mind you, these will be the same friends you will hear were the ones that the plaintiff instructed Ms. Kebe to follow up with, which she did. No matter, because she followed up with them. She classified it as harassing her friends, which she stated was too far. And because I can't put my hands on you, I'm going to sue you for defamation of character. And so, what you're really going to be asked to do here today by the plaintiff is to put your hands on these people. And what you're going to find, ladies and gentlemen, is that Ms. Kebe had no malice in this case. Mr. Kebe, by continuing to allow the videos to stay up, also has no malice in this case. And at the end, once you all hear the statements in their proper context, you will find there's no liability for Ms. Kebe, Mr. Kebe, or Kebe Studios. Thank you. So the court says, all right, thank you. That ends the opening statements, and we will proceed with the plaintiff's case. Plaintiff can call her first witness. And so, of course, they're going to call Kebe to the stand. And before that happens, of course, Kebe's lawyer wants to come in and has some other things that she now wants to litigate. You know, from what I got out of my impression of Kebe's lawyer is she was hoping that the judge was going to guide her in managing this case. And I think you'll see that later in, as the transcripts are read all over YouTube, you'll see, especially the first day, because even the very first day, the judge asked Kebe's attorney, he said, what law are you citing? Wait, what? And it's just crazy. But I feel like Kebe's attorneys, or their opening statement, I think it missed on key things. And again, I think they thought that they were going to be able to sum it up and say, we didn't do it. We didn't do it with malice. We didn't do it intentionally. But the more evidence that comes in, CardiB's attorney is super duper awesome. So that's it. That's the podcast. Be on the lookout. We're going to continue. I'm going to continue to go over some of these transcripts just to get in there and just see. And so we can get the full 411, because the truth is, I know I saw, once the verdict came down, and I know that I heard TashaK make a statement just before the verdict came down where she was saying, yeah, everything you're hearing is lies. And I'm like, that doesn't even sound right. That doesn't even sound right. So that's why I'm glad to have these transcripts and glad to be able to go over them. So that's it. That's the podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. I want to hear from you, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any videos that I upload. And so until next time, we will see you when we see you. Welcome to the Only Male Cruise Show, the podcast. I am the only Male Cruise. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Let's go to work.